Support for today's show comes from Career Fitter. Career Fitter is a site where they give you a 60-question test. Takes about 10 minutes. And out of that, they're going to give you recommendations basically for your ideal business environment, a team building approach, career matches, work strengths, income potential based upon job matching, preferred communications methods, weaknesses that you may have, a whole host of things. They'll give you a free report. They have a premium report as well. Quality service recommended by Forbes, Psychology Today, and quite a few others. So use the link in the show notes. It will help you start to figure out some of the things you might consider with a new career. And if you hire me to coach you, I'll give you a little bit of a discount and reimburse you for some of the cost of the premium report, because it'll help us both with coaching. And now, let's get going. Episode 2131 of the number one podcast and Apple Podcast for job search. This is No BS Job Search Advice Radio. I'm Jeff Altman, the Big Game Hunter, and welcome. I say this is the number one podcast and Apple Podcast for job search because it's over 2,100 episodes. No show is even close to this one. We've done more to help job hunters for longer than any other show at this point. At some point, someone will pass me, I'm sure, but right now, 2,131 episodes. Woo! Today is part one of an interview I did with Jennifer Turling, who wrote a book called How to Figure Out What to Do with Your Life. Terrific book. Big part of this is about informational interviews and shadowing, and we cover that in this part. Hope you find it helpful. Hope you give it a great review wherever you listen to the show, and we'll be back in just one moment. Today's show is brought to you by FlexJobs. At FlexJobs, you can find flexible work at home, real jobs available in a host of different fields that you can apply for. Now, to get access to the application, you have to create an account, but it has jobs in HR, recruiting, graphic design, bilingual positions, sales. There's lots of different categories of positions that are available. So use the link in the show notes, go to FlexJobs, and see what they have for you for flexible work. And with that, we'll be back in just one moment. So my guest today is Jennifer Turling, an entrepreneur, writer, speaker, the CEO of Maker Kids, which started the first and largest maker space for kids in the world and now runs award-winning virtual programs, camps, parties on coding, robotics, and Minecraft to help kids get more confident and resilient. She's also the author of How to Figure Out What to Do with Your Life, which Deepak Chopra called a brilliant instructional manual. Jennifer, thanks for making time today with this crazy setup that I have today.
Oh, thanks so much for having me.
My pleasure. So we're going to be talking about informational interviews and getting to people that most people would be afraid of reaching out to. Now, I'm going to ask this in an obnoxious way. You reached out to folks at Airbnb, the founders there, and a couple of other places and got some help?
Absolutely.
Okay, so number one, why? Number two is how? Who, what, where, when, why, how? How about that one? We do it from journalism.
Oh, sure. Well, my journey was I was dissatisfied in my corporate career. I couldn't figure out what to do next. I tried all sorts of things like career coaching and career testing to help figure out what might be a better fit, but I couldn't figure it out. So I realized I might need to develop my own process. And I thought perhaps a good process could be meeting with and interviewing and shadowing people that I admired to learn how they figured out what to do with their lives. So I started cold emailing all these people in Silicon Valley, entrepreneurs, investors, and professors to ask them if they would meet with me to discuss like how they figured out what to do with their lives. And a bunch of them said yes. So I yeah, I had assembled like a cold email format that I used. I guessed people's email addresses, and then I emailed them and asked if they'd meet with me, and then met with a bunch of them and was able to ask them about how they made some of their career choices and use that information to help inform my own.
It's fascinating because, as a coach, I talk to people all the time, and I talk with them about informational interviewing. And their first reaction is, no one will ever get back to me. I'm worthless. That part they don't say, but that's implied in that message. Were you living in Toronto at that time, Chile? Where were you that you were reaching out to folks in the Valley?
So I was living in Toronto, and then I actually quit and flew to Silicon Valley, and that's when I started emailing people. But I've also emailed people who live in different places from where I'm living, and they're willing to meet virtually or for a call too. And yeah, it's a common misperception that people won't get back to you, but it turns out that a lot of these folks don't receive many emails like this and are more than willing to give back and help out, and also take an opportunity to reflect on their own choices.
It's amazing. So I'm going to ask what everyone, I'm sure, asks. What the heck did you say that got their attention, that got through to them, that made them say, okay, I'll do it?
Well, I have a pretty specific cold email format that I share in the book, but just some basic elements of it, and then the full outline is in the book. I basically said that I was a young, recent graduate who had been dissatisfied in my career and was trying to figure out what to do next. And I wondered if I could meet with them for 5 minutes of their time, because I really admired their work, to ask them some questions that might be able to help me figure it out. And of course, the meetings ended up being longer than 5 minutes, but I was surprised and impressed that a lot of them said yes.
Amazing. And then when you actually got to talk to them, now I have the hunch this is pre-COVID days, right?
This is pre-COVID, yeah.
Yeah. So you got to meet with them. Now it'll be over Zoom or whatever the platform might be. And you were able to get in front of them, like, what do you ask? Like,
well, I asked them all sorts of different questions. It was different for each person, but I wanted to know more about like how they had chosen their career. I studied each person's profiles and backgrounds a bit before I met up with them, so I could know what I wanted to ask them. And I asked them about key decision points. So like at different parts of their lives, like how did they decide what they wanted to do while they were graduating from school? And then if they'd done something different, like if they'd changed careers along the way, how had they decided to do that? And then how did they get to where they were today? What was their day-to-day like? And were they happy in it? If they would have done something differently, what would it have been? And what recommendations did they have for me today to figure out what I wanted to do?
So that really works nicely with career changing, because they don't think you're ever going to ask them for a job. Right. And normally when I coach people, I'll say, I'd like some advice from you, much the same way as you do. I said, and I'm not there to ask you for a job, although if you offered me one, I certainly wouldn't mind. Which injects some personality into the conversation. And thus the idea became, how do you get in front? How do you distinguish yourself from other people? And it's a beautiful setup that you have. Absolutely gorgeous.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So then from there, it becomes the question of how do you promote yourself to wind up getting a role? Now, you didn't graduate and then do all this stuff and start your business, did you?
Well, I graduated and then I went into the corporate job that I was dissatisfied in. Uh-huh. And then I quit and started doing the informational interviewing and shadowing. That helped me figure out that I wanted to become an entrepreneur. And I got started with trying out different business ideas and coming to the one that I have today, which is Maker Kids.
Excellent. So with shadowing, how did you propose it? What types of business did you shadow? How did you go about setting it up for yourself? Other than, hi, can I shadow you for a day or two?
Well, I made a PDF pitch that pitched myself and why I would be a valuable shadow to them. And I found at the time I was considering 6 different types of careers. So I tried to find companies that were in each of those different areas and pitched my shadowing to them. And each shadow experience looked different. There was a CEO, the CEO of Kiva, Matt Flannery at the time, who had me be his literal shadow for the day. He called me his anthropological observer. So I would sit in the corner of his meetings and people would be like, who's that? And he'd be like, oh, that's my shadow. Just don't pay attention to her. And so that was a really cool opportunity to learn, like as a fly on the wall, and an interesting opportunity for him to reflect. And then there were other companies, like one called Causes that was initially started by Sean Parker, who started Napster. And at that location, I basically just did admin work for the week, which was also a good way to learn about the organization. And I got to go to lunches with folks and that sort of thing. And then for another company, I did strategy work, actually for 2 companies that I shadowed for a couple days each. I did strategy work for them and developed some new strategies for their consideration. And at the Stanford D School, I thought this was a really cool part of their work. I got to do some screen printing of T-shirts. So that was super fun. So all sorts of different experiences that all really helped me to figure out what I wanted to do.
Fascinating. Screen printing of T-shirts.
Oh, yeah.
I'm laughing because I'm working on a T-shirt design.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, for a saying that I end all my sessions with. So it's just very funny that surfaced here. But then there's the part about self-promotion. Because to me, one of the things that most professionals don't do well, I can't say job hunters, because it really should be before you're looking for a job, is around self-promotion. How to make people want to reach to you, to be seen as an expert, to be seen as someone that they want to have the conversation with. You want to speak to that, please?
Yeah, sure. So in part of my book, I talk about how to have a great online brand for yourself. And I think the very first step of that is doing a cleanup. So taking a look at what's your existing online brand, what might be out there that maybe you wouldn't want splashed across the front page of the New York Times or want prospective employers or employees or colleagues to see. So cleaning that stuff up, maybe it's a, photo of you, I don't know.
Being inappropriate, we'll just call it that.
Inappropriate photos. So clean those up and then see what you can do to make yourself the ideal candidate for a job or a company that you're interested in. So that means something like creating a portfolio for a lot of different positions is super helpful. Like if you're a designer, creating a portfolio with different designs or many different types of roles, it's helpful to have a portfolio for them. And also creating a consistent color scheme, ideally, a nice looking resume and cover letter, some nice photos of yourself, and really trying to put out knowledge that can benefit others or work that can benefit others. I think those are some really good ways to create your online brand, and it can lead to some really cool opportunities too, like inbound employment opportunities or speaking opportunities or writing opportunities. And to the extent that you're interested in something like sharing your knowledge or writing, it can be really cool to not just do that for social media, but also for publications, if that's something you're interested in.
Publication?
Yeah, like a book or an article that you submit to places and then maybe they post. These are all different ways that people can find you and you can share your knowledge in ways that it'll benefit others.
And where have your articles appeared so far?
Forbes, Strategy Magazine, Business Insider, number of different newspapers. Yeah, those are some of the ones that I remember.
And how did you target what to write for each? What prompted you to reach out to, I think in what I read earlier, Huffington Post, Forbes, and a couple of others. How did you target for HuffPo? Did they reach to you? Did you reach to them?
Well, I'll give the example of Forbes. So when I was shadowing, I reached out to someone on Twitter who I noticed had written for a bunch of cool publications. And I cold emailed her and asked her if she would be willing to meet with me. And then I asked how she did it, like how she managed to get those articles published. And she told me, which I didn't know at the time, that there's all these different contributing organizations to sites like Forbes and Huffington Post and Business Insider. And one of them is called the Muse. It was called the Daily Muse at the time. It's career advice. And she said she'd written an article for them and they'd put it on their website. And then some of the best ones on their website, they would submit to Forbes or different other publications, and then they would potentially get published. So I reached out to them and asked if I could do an article for them. And I'm trying to remember if I pitched the topic or if I asked them if they had a certain topic in mind, but a lot of people had been asking me about the self-education journey that I'd done. And so that's what I ended up writing it about. And I thought it was just going to go on the Daily Muse, now the Muse's site. I hoped that it would go on Forbes because I thought that would be a cool thing to try, but I never heard whether it was going to or not. And then the morning after the Muse article came out, I woke up to receive an email from someone who said, "Hey, I loved your Forbes article." And I was like, "What? Could you send me the link?" And they sent me the link. So the article was live. And from there, the emails didn't stop. I've gotten hundreds of emails from that article over the years. And that was what prompted me to write the book, actually, was that so many readers were asking for more information about, how to do things like cold email and shadow and prototype your career, that I decided to write it all down in the book.
Excellent. So what I'm hearing you say is there's almost like a buffer between certain sites and the writer, that they in turn will publish, and as a result, they'll wind up curating it for a Forbes or a Huffington Post or whomever, and allow, in this case, the Muse to make a decision about who they think is appropriate for the even larger publication and submit to them. Did I get that right?
Yeah, that's the way I understand it.
Super. Tomorrow I'll be back with part 2 of my interview with Jennifer Turling, where we talk more about how to figure out what to do with your life. So that's today's show. I hope you found it helpful. And if you did, here are a few things I can do to help you with your job search beyond simply being your coach. First of all, I've got a new book out called The Right Answers to Tough Interview Questions. It is like a cookbook with answers to tons of interview questions that you're going to be asked on interviews. And if you pair it up with my other new book, The Ultimate Job Interview Framework, they are a terrific pair of books to help you with interviewing. In addition, you probably have noticed my show notes are pretty thorough with products and services that can help you with your search. And connect with me on LinkedIn at linkedin.com/IN/The Big Game Hunter. Lastly, my website has a ton of great information. That's thebiggamehunter.us. Now, if you're not ready to go there and go through the blog, put the address in your phone, thebiggamehunter.us, Jeff Altman. So this way, when you're ready to go, you have a way of getting back to my website. Hope you have a terrific day, and most importantly, be great! Be great!